This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon, this is The Bigger Picture. I'm Lee Chui Lin. Every year it seems we are getting closer and closer to the future envisioned in science fiction movies. We can grow organs outside of our bodies, we can reattach and even regrow severed fingers. How is all of this possible, and what do stem cells have to do with it anyway? Dr. Then Kong Yong, a stem cell expert, tells us about what could be the future of health and our bodies. Dr. Then, what are stem cells, to start off?
Well, stem cells are, if you like, master cells. They are cells that, in theory, could be divided into its own, another stem cells, or it could be divided into a daughter cell, which could be the end product of our body, for example, skin or liver or any parts of the bodies. So they have the potentials to form many different cells, or it could be a particular type of cell lines. So this is a broad definition of stem cells.
So they're valuable because they could become anything?
Yes and no, depends on what sort of stem cells we are talking about. From a certain type of stem cells called progenitor cells, they have the potential to form only a particular type of cells, whereas there are other types of stem cells, for example, embryonic stem cells, has the potential to form any part of the body. Or there are multipotent stem cells which can form many different parts of the bodies or tissues.
So is there such a thing as the two main types of stem cells? Yeah,
people like to classify it broadly into embryonic and non-embryonic type or adult stem cells. That's a very broad classification. Of course, there are other ways you could classify stem cells, and stem cells is a variety of cells. It's not one particular cells that we're talking at.
What is the difference then between stem cells in adult organisms and in developing embryos? I think you mentioned a little bit there just now. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, if embryonic stem cells potentially is multipotent. They have the potential to develop into any parts of the body. Essentially, that's where we develop from. We develop from an embryo. Whereas when the baby is formed, we do have a type of stem cells called adult stem cells, and there's got some limitations. They are still multipotent. Some stem cells can be transformed into a wide variety of cell types, but there are limitations compared to embryonic stem cells.
Stem cells, by their nature, as you pointed out, are cells that can divide and self-renew. How do they fit into this notion of tissue engineering?
Tissue engineering is it's an extension of stem cells, if you like. It encompasses a lot of things apart from just cells. It encompasses the cells, the biomaterials, the mechanical part of things, how to create a tissue-like organs in our body based on cells and biomaterials.
We've been talking a bit about multipotent stem cells and things like that. How do stem cells kind of develop and result in differentiated cells for different parts of the body?
Our cells take its cue from the surrounding, and it's not just the media that it grows in and the surrounding things, for example, like the microtopography, the terrain, the collagens, the extracellular matrix around it, the cell-to-cell interactions, the electrical signals. So there are a lot of things that can influence the character of the cells. And we don't live in cells don't live in a very flat environment like we look into in a tissue culture flower, which is a flat surface. The cells live in a very elaborate environment, in a very elaborate micro-architecture in our body, for example. It's all these little cues that they take from, and that's what determine what the cells should be.
Could you explain that term, microtopography? What does that mean?
It's terrain. Essentially, cells don't live on the flat surface in our body. The cells in our body are surrounded by collagens, and this collagen has got their structures, and the way the structures are formed will sometimes can affect the way the cells behave. And many years back, we produced a paper. We look at how the cells behave in a microtopography environment. If you have a very linear surface, the cells will align themselves in a linear fashion, and they'll produce matrix collagens in that particular fashion. So that the cells will produce a little microenvironment for themselves, depending on the surrounding topography.
When it comes to most modern therapies that are utilizing stem cell technology, how are these stem cells harvested?
There are various sources that we can harvest stem cells from. Commonly, it can be harvested from umbilical cord blood, umbilical cord tissue, also known as Wharton's jelly. In adults, it can be harvested from your fat. The fat has got stem cells, from bone marrow, and these cells are commonly known as mesenchymal stem cells, and they are multipotent in nature, i.e. they could be transformed into various different cell types or cell lineages.
Could you talk us through the process of actually harvesting these cells?
From the fats, we can harvest through your liposuction, the aspirate. From the bone is a fine little needle where you insert into the bone marrow, usually your hip, and you can aspirate a little bit pieces of tissue from there, and then it can grow them. And from the umbilical cord, you can systemically digest the extracellular matrix and allow the cells to come out on its own. These are some of the examples. Obviously, it depends on the tissue type. The way we harvest the cells is different from tissue to tissue.
What are some of the more common uses or common requirements for stem cell therapy? What is stem cell therapy currently being used for?
Stem cell therapy has been around for many years, for decades. One of the first uses is from bone marrow. Bone marrow hematopoietic stem cells are used for leukemias, and currently is still being used. And however, is gradually being superseded by umbilical cord blood, and now people, in fact, now in the future, people are looking at using adult stem cells for treatment, for various treatments for other diseases, so more beyond hematopoietic in origins.
One of the things that stem cells are being used for, as you pointed out, it's kind of an extension at the moment, is tissue engineering. Could you define the term for us? What exactly is tissue engineering?
Tissue engineering is it's not a specific field. It's a multidisciplinary approach. It encompasses people from various disciplines. Where I used to work in UK, we have people from cell biology, from clinicians, from physicists, photonics, people who study lasers. We have people who are biochemists, who are fluidics. So these people comes together and devise different techniques or machine known as bioreactors, and how they can grow the cells in there into matrix and stimulate them with various forms of either cytokines or growth factors, or mechanical stimulations, electrical stimulation, even magnetic stimulations, to try to increase or produce the matrix that you want, and to create organs or living tissue as closely resemble the human organ as much as possible.
In this case, when we use the term matrices, what exactly do we mean?
Matrix are the things that makes what we are. Without matrix, we'll all be like a little blob of snot, if you like. We don't have the structure. We can't move. So the cells will be a little very gelatinous-like. So matrix is a very important component of our body. They are there to provide the mechanical structure, the shape, and as well as to provide guidance to the cells, to tell the cells to form what they should be forming. So matrix can be either organic or inorganic. In tissue engineering, you can use inorganic form of biomaterials, and you see the cells in it, and slowly the cells will produce the matrix. The inorganic materials will gradually degrade with time, and hopefully form a little organ or tissue or bone or heart, for example.
Right, so it's, in a sense, it's the mold in which we would create something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is tissue engineering related to regenerative medicine? Are they one and the same?
Yeah, when it comes to regenerative medicines, it encompasses cell-based therapy in which you take the cells out and then you reinsert the cells back to the human tissue or organs. It also encompasses tissue engineering. Tissue engineering is something that is one step further or beyond. So you're not just looking at transplanting cells, you are actually creating a specific tissue or organs using cell and matrix in combination.
Okay, I'm speaking to Dr. Then Kong Yong, and we're a stem cell expert, and we're talking about stem cells and tissue engineering. We've covered how you can harvest stem cells, what exactly are stem cells. When we come back from the break, we will be discussing tissue engineering strategies as well as what it can do for permanently damaged organs on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
This is a download from BFM 89.9. The business station.
Good afternoon. This is The Bigger Picture. I'm Lee Chui Lin, joined today by Dr. Then Kong Yong, a stem cell expert, and we are discussing tissue engineering. Dr. Then, what are some tissue engineering strategies that have now arisen?
Recently, because I'm also an eye specialist, so recently we treated a few cases with chemical injuries. People who were blind for many years and scarred in their cornea. And we harvest some cells from the mouth called the buccal mucosa, and we grow them onto a cell sheet, onto amniotic membrane, and then we transform or we differentiate these cells into a corneal epithelial cell-like tissue, and then we transplant back into the patient's cornea. And we've done 2 successful cases, and we just did a third one recently, and the results have been very encouraging. And this is just one of the examples of what tissue engineering can do. You could harvest cells from a different part of the body, you can differentiate them in the lab into something else that's completely different, and then transplant it back into the patient's body, and this is so-called tailored medicine. I see it's going to catch on, and it's going to be the medicine of the future.
So, how long does it take for this growing and transplantation to actually happen?
It depends on the cells and sort of tissue you're looking at. For my case, it takes about 6 weeks for the cells to grow in the lab.
Right, so that's how long it took for your patient to get that transplant, 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think one of the most common problems with organ transplantation is the idea that potentially it could get rejected because it is something that is not from your body. So with tissue engineering, with it being engineered from cells from other parts of your body, is that a non-issue?
Yeah, if you harvest the cells from your own, we call it autologous cells, then it's not really a problem when it comes to rejection because it's ultimately your own self.
So you've mentioned some examples to do with corneas just then. What else is tissue engineering able to do for permanently damaged organs? Right
now, one of the first tissues that came onto the market in US is the bioengineering of skin. So in patients who had very severe burns, you could harvest a small piece of tissue from elsewhere which are not affected, and you can grow them in the lab into a huge sheet of tissue, and you can replace the burnt skin with that bioengineered skin. So that's one area. The other areas that people are looking into it are valvular replacement, the cardiac valve, or even heart itself, the entire heart organs. And recently in the US, they managed to use a pig's heart, and they decellularize the pig's heart, which means they get rid of all the cells from the pig's heart. So what you're left with is a biological matrix, and then you see that the cells, the matrix with stem cells, and they could get the heart to start beating again. So it was quite amazing because for the first time you could actually humanize a pig's organ and yet be able to demonstrate to be functional and potentially can be used for transplantation. So you're looking at growing organs in the laboratory in the future where there will be hundreds of beating hearts in the lab that you can choose from.
I still can't imagine what decellularizing even looks like. So that was the case where a pig's heart was, I guess, Is it safe to say?
Yes, you basically just left the matrix. You get rid of all of the cells. The cell is the most antigenic part of the tissue. So if you get rid of the cells, the pig cells, then it left the matrix, which are totally non-antigenic, and then you see them with the human cells, and then you can get the heart to become functional again, to become a beating heart. That is quite an achievement, I think.
So that's something fairly recent. In the past, how were artificial organs created and transplanted? I was reading that there was a lot of early success with growing bladders.
Yeah. There again, I think it's from a very similar group of scientists that produces heart. They're doing it for bladder in a very similar way. They can get a pig's bladder, and they decellularize the pig's bladder, and then they seed them with human cells, and then in the end you get a humanized pig's bladder. And that could be potentially used for patients who requires them, or with a bladder cancer tumor, for example.
On the other hand, what can you tell us about this thing called pixie dust that is being used to regenerate tissue lost and damaged in traumatic injuries?
Pixie dust is the stuff that Tinkerbell produces.
Yes, it is.
Well, yeah, I think that's been in the news recently. Essentially, pixie dust are matrix. And we talk a lot about matrix, the importance of matrix early on. Without the right matrix, the cells will not grow properly on it. So pixie dust is a form of matrix they harvest from a pig's bladder, I believe. And this matrix they turn into little powder. And whenever there's a wound or severe injuries, and they apply this matrix onto the wound, and that allows cells to regenerate because they have the right matrix there for it to grow on it. It's very similar to the way we could kind of grow bones or cartilage in a laboratory. When you talk about tissue engineering, we always talk about what sort of matrix to use, and pixie dust is just one of the several in the market now. People are using for tissue cell regeneration.
Is there a reason that pigs seem to be the subject of so much study in the case of tissue engineering?
Yeah, it is. Pig is probably the most important biologics, or should I say, where we derive the matrix from, purely because there's a lot of similarity between humans and the pigs, and also there are very few diseases that are known to humans that can be transmitted from the pigs. Although there are a few of them, but not as many as other species. And also, in general, the organ size in the pigs are very similar in terms of the dimension to humans. Which
is why the valve has been used in heart transplants before as well, right?
That's right. It's been used for many decades.
Yep. How does tissue engineering assist in maintaining or enhancing tissue function for clinical use?
I just described that earlier on about how we use the tissue bioengineered cornea. That's one example.
Yep.
And also like skin. These are the ones that we can do readily in the market nowadays when it comes to clinical use. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are others as well. But the main ones are we're talking about tissue engineering, corneas and skin. But when it comes to cell-based therapy, there are other diseases. When I notice, I kind of distinguish between cell therapies and tissue engineered product. Cell therapy, we just take the cells out from the body with very little manipulation to the cells, and we put them back into the humans. And for those conditions, there are many different type of diseases that are already being used, such as the heart failure or cartilage defect, joint defects, and things like that.
What can you tell us about cellular therapies for conditions such as cancer?
Cancer is that's a different type of cells altogether. For cancer, there are particular type of cells in our body called dendritic cells. Or natural killer cells. It's now being known that in patients who suffer from cancer, there's always a constant fight between our immune system and the cancer cells itself. So our body do have the potential to mount an immune system against the cancerous cells. And for dendritic cells, these cells are special cells that can present the antigens to our whole body immune system. It's like introducing a protein to the whole immune system so that our immune system can start to embark a fight, a response against the cancerous cells. And in order for the dendritic cells to do that, first it has to digest the cancer cell first. And once it digests the cancer cell, it breaks down into little fragments of proteins, and these fragment proteins get presented onto the cell surface, and that will mount an immune response. The white cells, lymphocytes will come in and recognize that specific protein and will start attacking the cancer cell. So a lot of work and research is going into this area, and with very limited early success in certain cancers that we see. But this is one area I think that is going to improve. The development is going to be a lot of interest into this area of treatment.
Okay, because everyone's always looking for a cure for cancer. What is special about the usage of cord blood in regenerative medicine? I think we talked about, umbilical cord stem cells right at the start of our interview, but is there anything that makes them particularly special?
Yeah, traditionally we used bone marrow-based stem cells for treating blood cancer or leukemias. And recently, over the last, well, it's not really that recent, more than 10 years back now, they found another way to treat this cancer, and that's the use of cord blood. Cord blood has got much more hematopoietic stem cells than bone marrow, and the main advantage is that they have a lower incidence of a condition called the graft versus host disease, which, i.e., when your stem cell that you transfuse into your body starts attacking your own body, is a condition called graft versus host. So they do have a lower incidence of that compared to bone marrow. And cord blood is something that usually people, once they deliver, they throw away, and it's something that's discarded. But I think it's blood banks around the world has realized there's a huge potential in this cord blood, so they're setting up blood banks to specialize in storing this cord blood because of its potential use in treating childhood leukemia.
So we've discussed things like cancer, cornea injuries, heart transplants. Are there any neural conditions that tissue engineering is also, looking towards curing or improving? Again,
I'll separate them into cell-based treatment or tissue engineered product. When in neurology with severed nerve, people are looking at matrix conduit made of matrix, a particular type of matrix that can be used to fix the two ends of the severed neurons. Others are looking at cell-based treatment, to be injected into the brain directly or into the cerebrospinal fluid with the hope of trying to regenerate the nerve that's been lost. As we know that neurons do not regenerate once it's died. And stem cells offered a potential in this, in treating many neurological diseases by means of regeneration. Whether the cells transform itself into neurons or whether it could be through hormonal or cytokine effect is still debatable. But what we're seeing now from early results in animal studies, that there is a potential in the use of stem cells in regenerating nerves and neurons, including patients who suffers from Alzheimer's or stroke.
Which could make all the difference in the world, really. What are some of the more common myths that you see pertaining to stem cells that people seem to just can't get right?
I think when you talk about stem cell, everyone thinks that it's only one particular type of cells. It's like one size fits all. And that is not true, because there are many different types of stem cells, and different stem cells has got their own potential as well as the risk. And they also have a limitation as to what they can do. They are disease specific. It doesn't mean that one stem cells can cure every single disease known to mankind. So I think that is the myth that it's been around. And as well as every time I go around, I see a lot of cosmetic industries. They do advertise a lot on stem cells. Human stem cells are really for humans. If you inject your body with stem cells from from plants or from other species, the chances are it's probably not going to work on humans, because they have limitation when you talk about cross-species efficacy.
Obviously, because, I mean, what can they really become?
Yeah,
Yep.
turn the plant.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand of that also, a lot of people are very opposed to stem cell therapies and have all these ethical concerns to do with it. What would your response be to this?
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy sometimes when it comes to stem cells therapy. One issue is that whether you use embryonic stem cells or adult stem cells. Obviously, there are certain religious groups are very much against use of embryonic stem cells, but I see more and more potentials in the use of adult-based stem cells, and this is, I believe, is going to kick off, and I think it's around us, and the potential is huge. Another controversy is the regulatory side of things. Traditionally, we have medicine, and we have medical devices, and then we have regulations to govern organ transplantations, as well as in certain countries, a special regulation against not against for IVF treatment to produce babies. So cell-based treatment is a completely new area, and many countries are struggling to come up with their own regulations in this aspect. So it's very hard to regulate these industries, and there's a lot of controversies in the United States. For example, the FDA do not have any specific guidelines for cell-based therapy, and recently, in the recent High Court judgment, they felt that this thing should be regulated as though it's a drug. Personally, I don't quite agree with that. It's very different from drugs, and in Europe, it's being governed as a separate category known as advanced therapies. Advanced therapies encompasses gene therapy as well as tissue engineered product, and I feel that this area should have a separate entity, and it should not be categorized under pharma or medical devices or organ transplantation. So it should be a separate category altogether.
Because it's something that's here to stay, so it needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. How do all these new technologies affect the person on the street?
Watch this space. Yeah. Probably not immediately, but I think you will see over the next couple of years or even the next 10 years, you will see that cell-based treatment is going to be more widely used. You'll hear more about it, and including the press, the newspapers, and I won't be surprised that this thing is going to be increasing more popular, because you look at the number of papers produced just on one particular type of cells, like mesenchymal stem cell alone, is exponential every year over the past decades. So this thing will translate into clinical practice eventually, and the more we learn about it, the more we understand how these cells behave, the more we see the potential in it, and the more disease we think it can be used to be treated for. And eventually, I think the ordinary person on the street will hopefully benefit from the use of stem cells.
Thank you, Dr. Thin. I've been speaking to Dr. Thin Kong Yong, a stem cell expert, and we have been discussing stem cells and tissue engineering on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.